The dust swirled like copper-colored ghosts across the dry streets of Yuba City, California, as Amelia Adler clutched her shawl against the wind that seemed to follow her wherever she went. It was 1873, and the mining town had seen better days. Gold fever had subsided, leaving behind those too stubborn or too broken to leave. Amelia counted herself among the latter, though not by choice. She kept her eyes down as she hurried past the mercantile, ignoring the whispers that trailed her like faithful dogs. There she goes, the Adler girl. Bad luck follows that one like a shadow. 3 years she'd endured these whispers, ever since the accident at the mine that took her father and brother, leaving nothing but bills and suspicion in their wake. The same day her fiancé had called off their engagement, claiming her family was cursed. The town had been all too eager to agree. Amelia quickened her pace toward the boarding house where she worked for Mrs. Holloway, a widow whose arthritis had become too painful to manage the daily chores. It wasn't much, but it kept a roof over her head and food, scarce as it was, on her table. Miss Adler. A deep voice called from behind her. She didn't turn. Strangers meant trouble, and trouble was the last thing she needed. But the sound of boots on the wooden sidewalk grew closer, and Amelia reluctantly stopped, her shoulders tensing beneath her worn shawl. "Miss Adler," the voice repeated, softer now. She turned to face a man she'd never seen before. Tall, with a strong jawline partially hidden behind several days' worth of stubble. His eyes were the color of the Sierra Nevada pines in summer, and they crinkled at the corners when he offered a tentative smile. Dusty from travel, but his clothes were of good quality, if well worn. A cowboy, by the look of him, though something about his bearing suggested he was more than that. "I don't know you," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. "August Ellis," he said, tipping his hat. "I've been looking for you." Fear flickered across Amelia's face. "Why would you be looking for me? I don't know any August Ellis." "I knew your brother," he said quietly. "James and I worked the Silver Creek mine together before the collapse." Amelia's hand tightened around her shawl. "I don't talk about my brother or father, not to anyone, especially not strangers." August nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'm sorry to trouble you. But I have something that belonged to James. I promised him I'd return it if anything ever happened to him." "Return what?" she asked, suspicion lacing her words. Before August could answer, Mrs. Holloway's voice rang out from the boarding house porch. "Amelia." "Those linens won't wash themselves, girl. I have to go," Amelia said, turning away. "I'll be at the White Horse Saloon," August called after her. "I'll wait there until sundown if you change your mind." Amelia hurried toward the boarding house, not looking back, though she could feel August Ellis's gaze following her. She nodded politely to Mrs. Holloway as she passed through the door into the dim interior. "Who was that man?" the older woman asked, her eyes narrow with curiosity. "No one," Amelia replied. "Just passing through, I expect," Mrs. Holloway sniffed. "Men don't stop to talk to women they don't know unless they want something. You be careful, Amelia. Your reputation can't take another beating." Amelia bit back a sharp reply. Her reputation had been destroyed through no fault of her own, simply by association with tragedy. But arguing would only cost her this position, and jobs for women in Yuba City were scarce. The afternoon passed in a blur of wash water, scrubbing and hanging linens to dry in the hot California sun. All the while, Amelia's thoughts kept returning to the stranger with the green eyes. What could he possibly have that belonged to James? Her brother had owned precious little when he died. As twilight approached, Amelia found herself standing in her small room, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. Her dark blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her blue eyes shadowed with exhaustion and weariness. She was only 22, but the last 3 years had etched fine lines at the corners of her eyes. Before she could change her mind, she untied her apron and reached for her shawl. "I'm going out for a short while, Mrs. Holloway," she called. "I'll be back before full dark." The older woman appeared in the hallway, surprise evident on her face. You never go out in the evenings. It won't take long, Amelia assured her. The White Horse Saloon stood at the far end of Main Street, its windows glowing with lantern light. Amelia had never set foot inside. It wasn't a place for respectable women, but tonight she found her steps carrying her toward its swinging doors. She paused outside, gathering her courage, aware of the curious glances from passers-by. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the doors. Conversation stuttered to a halt as heads turned in her direction. The piano player missed a note, the discordant sound hanging in the sudden silence. Amelia scanned the room, her cheeks burning with embarrassment until she spotted August Ellis at a corner table, a glass of whiskey untouched before him. His eyes widened when he saw her, and he stood quickly, knocking his chair back in his haste. He righted it with an apologetic glance at the barkeep before making his way to her. "Miss Adler," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I didn't think you'd come." "I almost didn't," she admitted, "but if you have something of my brother's." August nodded. "Not here," he said, glancing around at the curious onlookers. "May I walk you somewhere we can talk privately?" Amelia hesitated, then nodded. "The creek path. It should be quiet this time of evening." They exited the saloon together, ignoring the whispers that followed them. The evening air was cooling, the sky painted in shades of purple and orange as the sun sank behind the western mountains. They walked in silence until they reached the small wooden bridge that crossed Yuba Creek. August leaned against the railing, his expression somber in the fading light. "Your brother saved my life," he said without preamble. "Did you know that?" Amelia shook her head. "James didn't write much, and when he did, it was mostly to say he was doing well and would be home soon." "That sounds like him, never wanted to worry his family." August reached into his pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch. "We were working a new seam when the support beams started to crack. James shoved me toward the exit just before the roof came down. I made it out with just a broken arm and some cuts. He wasn't so lucky." Amelia swallowed hard, fighting the tears that threatened. "They said it was because of us the Adlers, that we bring bad luck, that we're cursed." August's expression hardened. "That's horseshit, pardon my language. The company cut corners on the supports." Everyone knew it, but no one said anything because we all needed the work. What happened wasn't bad luck or a curse. It was greed, plain and simple. He held out the leather pouch to her. "I found this in James's things after they recovered the bodies. I meant to bring it to you sooner, but I had some business to finish first." With trembling hands, Amelia accepted the pouch. It was heavy for its size, and when she loosened the drawstring and emptied the contents into her palm, she gasped. Gold raw nuggets and a few roughly minted coins gleamed in the last light of day. "There's almost $500 worth there," August said quietly. "James was saving it as a surprise for you and your father. He wanted to buy back your family's ranch." Tears spilled down Amelia's cheeks as she stared at her brother's secret treasure. "We lost it after Mother died. Father couldn't keep up with the taxes and the medical bills. James told me," August said gently. "He was working double shifts to save faster. Said his little sister deserved better than to end up a spinster in a mining town." A sob escaped Amelia's lips before she could stop it. Quickly, she poured the gold back into the pouch and secured it tightly. "Thank you for this," she whispered. "It means more than you know." August nodded, his eyes kind. "There's something else. I've purchased the old Sullivan property just outside of town. I'm planning to raise horses. It's good land with plenty of water and grazing." "Why are you telling me this?" Amelia asked, confusion replacing her grief. "Because I need help. Someone to manage the household, keep the books. I remembered James talking about how good you were with numbers." Amelia's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Are you offering me a job, Mr. Ellis?" "I am," he said firmly. "And before you ask, it's not charity. I genuinely need the help, and from what James told me, you're exactly the kind of person I'm looking for. Smart, capable, hardworking." "You don't know me," Amelia protested. "I know enough," August countered. "The pay is $15 a month plus room and board." You'd have your own cabin on the property small, but it's yours alone. No more answering to landlords or employers who treat you like you're less than them. It was more money than she made at the boarding house, and the promise of privacy was tempting. Still, Amelia hesitated. The people in town. They talk if I go to work for a single man living on his property. Let them talk, August said with a shrug. I'm not asking anything improper of you, Miss Adler. This is strictly business. You need work, I need help. It's that simple. But it wasn't simple, and they both knew it. Amelia's reputation, already damaged by the whispers of a family curse, would suffer further. Yet the weight of the gold in her hand, her brother's last gift, gave her courage. Perhaps it was time to stop caring what Yuba City thought of her. I'll need to give Mrs. Holloway notice, she said finally. A week, at least. August's face broke into a genuine smile, transforming his features from merely handsome to something that made Amelia's heart beat faster. A week is fine. I'll come for you next Friday with the wagon. Thank you, Mr. Ellis. August, please, he said. If we're to work together, I'd prefer less formality. Amelia nodded, though she wasn't sure she was ready for such familiarity. I should get back before Mrs. Holloway locks me out for the night. August walked her to the edge of the main street, maintaining a respectful distance. Until Friday, then, he said, tipping his hat before turning back toward the saloon. Amelia watched him go, the pouch of gold clutched tightly in her hand, and for the first time in 3 years she felt something like hope stir in her chest. The week passed in a blur of preparations and explanations. Mrs. Holloway was predictably disapproving of Amelia's decision to work for a bachelor, but the promise of an extra week's pay softened her protests somewhat. The rest of the town seemed equally divided between scandalized whispers and grudging admiration for Amelia's audacity. Friday dawned bright and clear, the kind of autumn day that hinted at winter without surrendering summer's warmth. Amelia packed her few belongings: clothes, books, her mother's silver hairbrush, and the small wooden box containing her father's pocket watch into a single trunk. The gold remained hidden in a secret pocket she'd sewn into her petticoat. August arrived promptly at noon, his wagon clean and freshly painted, pulled by a matched pair of bay horses that pranced with barely contained energy. He wore a clean shirt and had trimmed his beard, looking more like a respectable rancher than the trail-worn cowboy she'd met the week before. Miss Adler, he greeted her, hopping down from the wagon's seat to load her trunk. Ready for your new adventure? As ready as I'll ever be, she replied, unable to completely hide her nervousness. Mrs. Holloway stood on the porch, arms crossed over her ample bosom, watching with disapproval as August lifted Amelia's trunk into the wagon bed. You remember what I told you, girl, she called. A woman alone has only her reputation to protect her. August stiffened but said nothing as he offered Amelia his hand to help her onto the seat. She took it, noting the calluses on his palm and the gentle strength in his grip. Goodbye, Mrs. Holloway, Amelia called. Thank you for everything. The older woman merely sniffed and turned back into the house, closing the door with a firmness that suggested she was washing her hands of Amelia's fate. August clicked to the horses, and they moved forward with a jerk that nearly sent Amelia tumbling against him. She grabbed the seat rail to steady herself, her face flushing with embarrassment. Sorry about that, August said. Buck and Dan are a bit eager to get home. They don't much care for town. That makes 3 of us, Amelia murmured, then bit her lip, surprised at her own candor. August chuckled, a warm sound that seemed to vibrate through the space between them. 4, if you're counting me. Give me open country over town any day. The Sullivan property Ellis Ranch now, Amelia supposed lay 5 miles outside Yuba City, nestled in a small valley with rolling hills to the east and the Sierra Nevada mountains rising in the distance. As they crested the final hill, Amelia caught her first glimpse of what would be her new home. A large, 2-story farmhouse stood in a grove of oak trees, its white paint gleaming in the afternoon sun. Several outbuildings clustered nearby: a barn, what looked like a bunkhouse, and a small cabin set apart from the others. A corral held a dozen or so horses of various colors, and beyond that, fenced pastures stretched toward the foothills. "It's beautiful," Amelia said, unable to keep the awe from her voice. August smiled, pride evident in his expression. "It needed work when I bought it." Old man Sullivan let things go after his wife died, but the bones were good, and the land is some of the best in the county. He guided the wagon up the drive to the main house, where a tall, lean man with silver-streaked black hair waited on the porch. Beside him stood a plump woman with a kind face and flour-dusted hands. "That's Silas Johnson, my foreman, and his wife Martha, who does the cooking and some of the housekeeping," August explained. "They live in the bunkhouse. There are 2 ranch hands as well, Tom and Hank, brothers from Oregon." "They should be out with the horses now," Amelia nodded, suddenly nervous. What if these people believed the rumors about her? What if they, too, thought she was cursed? As if reading her thoughts, August said quietly, "I told them you were coming. They're good people, Amelia. They don't hold with town gossip." Before she could respond, they pulled up in front of the house, and Silas stepped forward to take the horse's reins. "Welcome back, boss," he said, his voice a deep rumble. "Miss Adler, it's a pleasure to meet you." James spoke highly of his sister. Surprise flashed across Amelia's face. "You knew my brother," Silas nodded, his weathered face solemn. "Worked with him in August at Silver Creek before I decided mining wasn't for me. Good man, your brother. Best shot in the county, too." "And the worst poker player," August added with a fond smile. "Couldn't bluff to save his life." A lump formed in Amelia's throat at this casual reminder that these men had known a side of her brother. She'd never seen the man he'd become in the years he'd been away from home. Martha bustled down the steps, wiping her hands on her apron. "You must be tired from your journey, Miss Adler. Come inside for some refreshment while the men take care of your things." Amelia allowed herself to be led into the house, momentarily overwhelmed by the warm welcome. The interior was simple but well-maintained, with polished wooden floors and sturdy, practical furniture. A large stone fireplace dominated the main room, flanked by bookshelves that were surprisingly well-stocked. "The kitchen's through here," Martha said, leading Amelia to a bright room at the back of the house. A large table stood in the center, already set with plates and cups. "I've made fresh bread and there's stew for supper. August mentioned you might be hungry after your travels." "It's only 5 miles," Amelia said, then immediately regretted her tone. "I mean, thank you, it's very kind of you," Martha smiled, understanding in her eyes. "It's a big change, leaving what's familiar no matter how far you're going. Sit, child, have some tea while it's hot." Amelia sank into a chair, grateful for the older woman's perception. "How long have you and Mr. Johnson worked for Mr. Ellis?" "Just since spring," Martha replied, pouring tea into a delicate china cup that seemed at odds with the rustic surroundings. August Mr. Ellis hired Silas away from the Circle B ranch with the promise of better pay and a share in the profits once the horse breeding business takes off. "I came along as part of the bargain." She winked conspiratorially. Silas can't cook worth a lick, and August was desperate for someone to manage the household. "And now that's to be my job," Martha nodded. "Some of it. The cooking's still mine, I won't give that up, but the books, the ordering of supplies, the management of the household accounts." "August mentioned you have a head for numbers." "I do," Amelia confirmed. "My father taught me. He said women should understand business as well as men do." "A progressive thinker, your father," Martha said approvingly. "August is the same way. Believes women have brains just as good as men's, maybe better in some cases." The sound of boots on the porch announced the return of the men. August entered first, followed by Silas carrying Amelia's trunk. "I've taken the liberty of having your things brought to the cabin," August said. "It's small, but I think you'll find it comfortable. Martha has stocked it with the basics, but if there's anything else you need, just say the word." "Thank you," Amelia said, standing. "I'd like to see it if that's all right. Of course, we can go now if you're ready." The cabin stood 100 yards from the main house, nestled beneath a large oak tree. It was indeed small, just one room with a covered porch, but as August opened the door, Amelia was struck by its charm. A cast-iron stove stood in one corner, a narrow bed in another. A small table with two chairs occupied the center of the room, and a rocking chair sat near the window, which was framed by crisp white curtains. "Martha's touch," August explained, following Amelia's gaze to the curtains. "She said a woman needs pretty things around her." "It's lovely," Amelia said sincerely, and it was small but clean, with personal touches that made it feel welcoming. Her trunk stood at the foot of the bed, unopened. "I'll leave you to get settled," August said. "Supper's at 6, just follow the lantern path to the main house when you're ready." He hesitated at the door. "Amelia, I want you to know you're safe here. Whatever you heard in town, whatever they said about you or your family, it doesn't matter here." Before she could respond, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Alone for the first time in what felt like forever, Amelia sank onto the bed, her emotions a tangled mess. Relief, fear, hope, uncertainty, they swirled within her like leaves in a dust devil. She reached beneath her skirts for the hidden pocket and withdrew the pouch of gold, holding it tightly for a moment, before rising to find a hiding place for it. The cabin had a loose floorboard beneath the rug, and there she secreted her brother's legacy, promising herself that someday soon she would find a better use for it. The next weeks fell into a rhythm that soothed Amelia's frayed nerves. Each morning she rose at dawn, lit the stove for warmth, and walked to the main house for breakfast with the ranch hands. After the men departed for their day's work, she and Martha would clear the table, and Amelia would settle in the small office off the main room to attend to the ranch accounts. August had been right, the work suited her. She had a knack for organization and a meticulous eye for detail that served her well as she sorted through the jumble of receipts and invoices that made up the ranch's financial records. By the end of her first month, she had created a system that allowed her to track expenses and income with a glance. "You're a marvel," August declared when she presented him with a clear accounting of the ranch's financial position. They were sitting in the office after supper, the lamplight casting a warm glow over the neat columns of figures in Amelia's ledger book. "I've been meaning to do this for months, but it kept getting pushed aside for more immediate concerns." "The breeding program is showing promise," Amelia noted, pointing to the income projections she'd calculated based on the quality of the foals born that spring. "If the next crop is as good, you'll have buyers coming from as far as San Francisco." August leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "James always said you were the smart one in the family." "He was being kind," Amelia demurred, closing the ledger. "James was brilliant with animals. He could gentle the wildest horse just by talking to it." "A gift he shared with you, it seems," August said with a smile. "I've seen you with that ornery mare no one else can get near." Amelia had indeed formed a bond with a skittish Palomino mare that had arrived at the ranch a week after she did. The horse, wild, caught, and traumatized by rough handling, had refused to let anyone approach her until Amelia had taken to sitting quietly by the corral, reading aloud from one of the books from August's library. Day by day, the mare had edged closer until finally she allowed Amelia to touch her golden coat. "Sonny just needs patience," Amelia said, using the name she'd given the mare. "Like most of us, I suppose." August's eyes softened at her words. "Like most of us," he agreed quietly. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the mantel and the occasional pop from the fireplace. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the windows with the promise of the season's first real storm. "I should get back to my cabin before the rain starts," Amelia said, rising from her chair. August stood as well, his expression concerned. "Let me walk you. It's getting dark earlier these days." "I know the path," Amelia protested, though not as strongly as she might have a month ago. She'd grown accustomed to August's protective nature, his insistence on seeing her safely to her door each evening. "Humor me," he said with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. They walked in companionable silence, the lantern August carried casting dancing shadows across the path. The air smelled of rain and pine, a scent Amelia had come to associate with freedom. At her door, August paused, his expression serious in the lantern light. "There's a social at the church in town on Saturday. Martha mentioned she'd like to go, and I thought, that is, would you like to join us?" Amelia stiffened, the invitation awakening memories of whispers and pointed fingers. "I don't think that would be wise." "Because of what people might say?" August asked, his voice gentle. "You know how they talk," Amelia said quietly. "I've tried to put all that behind me." "Perhaps it's time to show them they're wrong," August suggested. "You're not cursed, Amelia, you never were, and I won't let anyone say otherwise in my presence." The fierceness in his voice stirred something in Amelia's chest, a flicker of courage she'd thought extinguished long ago. "You can't fight the whole town." "Watch me," August said with a grin that was half challenge, half promise. Amelia couldn't help but smile in return, drawn in by his confidence. "Very well, Mr. Ellis, I'll attend your social, but don't say I didn't warn you." "Duly noted, Miss Adler," he replied, tipping his hat. "Sleep well. I believe we're in for quite a storm tonight." As if to punctuate his words, a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the valley. August waited until Amelia was safely inside before turning back toward the main house, the lantern's glow receding until it was swallowed by the gathering darkness. The storm raged through the night, but Amelia slept soundly for the first time in years, lulled by the drumming of rain on her roof and the knowledge that she was, for once, exactly where she was meant to be. Saturday arrived with clear skies and a crispness to the air that spoke of approaching winter. Amelia stood before the small mirror in her cabin, critically assessing her appearance. She had only one dress suitable for a social occasion, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. It was several years out of fashion, but she had added a fresh white collar and cuffs to brighten it up. A knock at her door interrupted her musings. She opened it to find Martha, resplendent in a burgundy dress with black trim. "My goodness, don't you look lovely?" the older woman exclaimed. "That blue is perfect with your coloring. Here, I brought you something." She held out a small box. "Just a little adornment for your hair. Every young woman should have something pretty for a social." Inside the box lay a delicate silver hairpin with a small pearl at its center. "Martha, I couldn't possibly—" "Nonsense," Martha interrupted with a firm shake of her head. "It was my daughter's. She's married with 3 children now, living in Sacramento. She'd want someone to use it, not have it gathering dust in my drawer." Touched by the gesture, Amelia accepted the pin and used it to secure a small twist of hair at the crown of her head, leaving the rest to fall in soft waves down her back. "Perfect," Martha declared. "Now the men are waiting with the wagon. Are you ready?" Amelia took a deep breath, fighting back the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "As ready as I'll ever be." August stood by the wagon, deep in conversation with Silas. He wore a clean black suit with a crisp white shirt, his hair neatly combed, his beard trimmed close to his jaw. When he looked up and saw Amelia, his conversation faltered mid-sentence, his eyes widening appreciatively. "Miss Adler," he said, recovering quickly. That is, blue suits you very well." "Thank you," Amelia replied, fighting a blush at his obvious admiration. "You look quite handsome yourself." Silas coughed discreetly, amusement dancing in his eyes as he helped Martha into the wagon. August offered his hand to Amelia, and she felt that same jolt of awareness she'd experienced the first time he touched her, a current of something undefined yet undeniable. The ride to town was filled with easy conversation, mostly between Martha and Silas, with August occasionally joining in. Amelia remained quiet, her anxiety growing as they approached Yuba City. It had been nearly 2 months since she'd left, and she wasn't sure what sort of reception awaited her. As they pulled onto Main Street, Amelia felt the familiar weight of stares. She kept her head high, determined not to show her discomfort. August must have sensed her tension. He leaned closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Remember, you have nothing to be ashamed of, and you're not alone." The church hall was decorated with autumn leaves and candles, tables laden with food lining one wall, a small band setting up in the corner. Families and couples filled the space, the hum of conversation and laughter creating a festive atmosphere. A hush fell as Amelia entered on August's arm, followed closely by Silas and Martha. For a moment, no one seemed to know quite how to react to the reappearance of the cursed Adler girl on the arm of the town's newest rancher. Then Reverend Miller stepped forward, his wife beside him. "Mr. Ellis, how good of you to join us tonight, and Miss Adler, what a pleasant surprise. We've missed your voice in the choir." "Thank you, Reverend," Amelia said, gratitude warming her voice. The Millers had always been kind to her, even after the rumors began. "Please, help yourselves to refreshments," Mrs. Miller added. "Sarah Jenkins has outdone herself with the apple pies this year." With that simple exchange, the tension in the room eased somewhat. People returned to their conversations, though Amelia was acutely aware of the curious glances still being cast their way. August guided her toward the refreshment table, his hand a steady presence at the small of her back. "See, not so bad," he murmured. "The night is young," Amelia replied dryly, but she felt some of her anxiety dissipate. They filled plates with food and found seats at a table with the Millers, and an elderly couple Amelia recognized as the Cartwrights, who owned the town's only bookshop. Conversation flowed more easily than Amelia had expected, focusing on neutral topics like the weather and the promise of a harsh winter. When the band began to play, August turned to Amelia with a questioning look. "Would you honor me with a dance, Miss Adler?" Dancing with August would be a clear statement to the town that she was under his protection, that she was not the outcast they'd made her. It was a bold move, and for a moment, Amelia hesitated. Then she thought of her brother's gold hidden beneath her floorboards, of her father's belief in her strength, of her mother's quiet dignity in the face of hardship. And she thought of August's words, "You're not cursed, Amelia, you never were." "I'd be delighted, Mr. Ellis," she said, placing her hand in his. He led her to the center of the floor where several couples were already dancing to a lively reel. August was a surprisingly graceful dancer, guiding her through the steps with confidence and care. Amelia found herself smiling, then laughing as he twirled her beneath his arm, the joy of movement and music momentarily banishing her self-consciousness. When the music slowed to a waltz, August drew her closer, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers with gentle firmness. "You dance beautifully," he said, his voice low and intimate despite the crowd around them. "My father taught me," Amelia replied. "He said every young woman should know how to waltz, even if she lives in a mining town with few opportunities to practice. A wise man, your father." "He was," Amelia agreed, a familiar pang of grief softened now by fond remembrance. "He would have liked you, I think." August's eyes warmed at her words. "I hope so," he said softly. As they turned, Amelia caught sight of a familiar face at the edge of the dance floor. Edwin Porter, the man who had once been her fiancé, watching them with a sour expression. He had married the banker's daughter 6 months after breaking his engagement to Amelia, a match that had elevated his position in town considerably. August followed her gaze, his expression hardening when he realized who had caught her attention. An old acquaintance. He asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Edwin Porter," Amelia said, her voice carefully neutral. "We were engaged briefly." "Ah," August said, understanding dawning in his eyes, "the man who believed in curses." "Among other things," Amelia confirmed. "It was for the best. We weren't well suited." "His loss," August said firmly, drawing her attention back to him with a gentle squeeze of her hand. "A profound one if he's only now realizing it." The waltz ended and August escorted Amelia back to their table. The evening progressed pleasantly with more dancing, conversation, and even some laughter. By the time they prepared to leave, Amelia felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. As August helped her into her shawl, Edwin Porter approached, his wife Caroline on his arm. "Amelia," he said, his voice carrying just the slightest slur of a man who'd visited the punch bowl too often. "Didn't expect to see you here tonight." "Edwin," Amelia acknowledged with a polite nod. "Caroline, I trust you're both well." Caroline, a petite blonde with a perpetually pinched expression, merely sniffed in response. "Surprised to see you in town," Edwin continued, his gaze shifting to August. "Word was you'd taken up with this cowboy here." August stiffened beside Amelia, but his voice remained calm. "Miss Adler manages my household and accounts, Mr. Porter. She's a valued employee and friend." "Is that what they're calling it these days?" Edwin said with a smirk. "Times change, I suppose." "Edwin," Caroline gasped, scandalized. "Some things don't change," August replied, his tone deceptively mild. "Like small-minded men who fear what they don't understand, or those who abandon their promises when faced with difficulty." Edwin's face flushed with anger. "Now see here." "No, you see here," August interrupted, stepping forward. Though he wasn't raising his voice, something in his bearing made Edwin take a step back. "Miss Adler has more dignity and grace in her little finger than you have in your entire being. She isn't cursed, she's extraordinary. And the only misfortune I see is that you were too blind to recognize it." A hush had fallen over the nearby tables, people watching the confrontation with avid interest. Amelia felt her cheeks burn, both with embarrassment at being the center of attention and with something warmer at August's fierce defense. "August," she said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "It's not worth it." He looked down at her, conflict evident in his eyes before he nodded once. "You're right, it isn't." He turned back to Edwin, his voice level. "Good evening, Mr. Porter. I believe we were just leaving." With that, he offered Amelia his arm and led her toward the door, his back straight, his head high. Silas and Martha followed. Silas looking impressed and Martha openly beaming. Outside, the night air was crisp and clean. Stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. August helped Amelia into the wagon, his touch gentle despite the anger still evident in the set of his jaw. "I apologize," he said once they were settled and Silas had started the team moving. "I shouldn't have lost my temper." "You didn't," Amelia pointed out. "Not really, and what you said—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Thank you." August looked at her then, his expression softening in the moonlight. "I meant every word." The ride home was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. When they reached the ranch, Silas and Martha bid them good night and headed for the bunkhouse, leaving August to walk Amelia to her cabin. They paused on her porch, the night sounds of crickets and distant coyotes wrapping around them like a familiar blanket. "Despite the ending, I enjoyed tonight," Amelia said, breaking the comfortable silence. "As did I," August replied, "though I enjoyed the company more than the occasion." Amelia smiled, ducking her head to hide the pleasure his words evoked. "You certainly made an impression on the town. Defending the cursed Adler girl will be talk for weeks." "You're not cursed," August said firmly, taking her hands in his. The warmth of his skin against hers sent shivers up her arms despite the mild night. "Amelia, surely you know that. It's superstition, nothing more." "I know that here," she said, touching her temple. "But here—" She moved her hand to her heart. "Sometimes I wonder if there isn't some truth to it. So much has gone wrong." "Life goes wrong for everyone," August said gently. "It's not a curse, it's just life. The difference is how we face it." "And how do you suggest I face it?" August's gaze was steady, his voice low and certain. "With your head high, with hope. With the knowledge that you are stronger than whatever comes your way." "You make it sound so simple." "It is and it isn't," he admitted. "But you don't have to do it alone, not anymore." Something in his tone, in the way he looked at her, made Amelia's breath catch. They'd been dancing around this moment for weeks, both aware of the growing connection between them but neither willing to acknowledge it directly. "August," she whispered, not quite a question, not quite a statement. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her cheek. "May I?" he asked, his eyes seeking permission for what they both wanted. Amelia nodded, unable to find her voice, and then his lips were on hers, gentle at first, then with growing confidence as she responded. His hands came up to frame her face, thumbs stroking her cheeks with a tenderness that made her heart ache. When they finally broke apart, Amelia felt dazed, her pulse racing, her skin flushed with warmth that had nothing to do with the night air. "I've been wanting to do that since the moment I saw you on that dusty street," August confessed, his voice husky. "That long?" Amelia asked, surprise coloring her tone. August nodded, a sheepish smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Your brother used to talk about his clever, beautiful sister. I thought he was exaggerating until I saw you for myself. You never said. How could I? You were wary enough as it was, and I wanted you to trust me first, to know me as a man, not just as your brother's friend or your employer." Amelia considered his words, recognizing the truth in them. She had been wary, defensive, expecting the worst from everyone after years of being treated as an outcast. "And now?" she asked softly. "Now," August said, taking her hands in his again, "now I'm hoping you might see me as something more than your employer, as a man who cares deeply for you, who would like permission to court you properly if you're willing." The words, so formal and yet so heartfelt, brought a smile to Amelia's lips. "I believe I might be persuaded," she said, a teasing note entering her voice for perhaps the first time since they'd met. August grinned, the worry easing from his expression. "Persuaded him." "I'll take that as a challenge, Miss Adler." "I thought you might, Mr. Ellis." He kissed her again, a brief, sweet touch that held promise of more to come. "Good night, Amelia, sweet dreams." "Good night, August." As she watched him walk back toward the main house, Amelia felt a sense of peace settle over her. For the first time in years, she looked toward the future with anticipation rather than dread. The weeks that followed were filled with a quiet joy Amelia had almost forgotten was possible. Her work at the ranch continued, but now there were stolen moments with August, a brush of hands as they passed documents back and forth, shared smiles across the dinner table, evening walks that often ended with kisses on her porch. The ranch hands accepted the shift in their relationship with knowing grins and good-natured, teasing that August bore with grace. Martha was openly delighted, treating Amelia more and more like a daughter as fall deepened into winter. December brought the first heavy snow, transforming the ranch into a wonderland of white. Amelia stood at the window of the main house, watching fat flakes drift down from a pewter sky when she felt August's presence behind her. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he murmured, slipping his arms around her waist. Amelia agreed, leaning back against his solid warmth. "I've always loved the first snow. Everything looks so clean, so new. A fresh start," August said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Speaking of which." He turned her in his arms, his expression suddenly serious. "I had planned to wait until Christmas, but seeing you here looking so content. Amelia, these past months have been the happiest of my life." Amelia's heart began to race, hope and fear tangling in her chest. "Mine too," she admitted softly. August took a deep breath, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I love you, Amelia Adler. Your strength, your kindness, your quiet courage. I love the way you talk to the horses, the furrow between your brows when you're concentrating on the accounts, the sound of your laughter that's become so much more frequent lately. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you just how much." He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a single diamond that caught the winter light and scattered it like stars. "Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Amelia's vision, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, August, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. That evening, as they gathered around the dinner table, Amelia, Silas, Martha, and the ranch hands, August stood to make the announcement. Champagne was produced from a hidden stash, and toasts were made to the future Mrs. Ellis. To think, Silas said, raising his glass, it all started with a promise to a friend. James would be mighty pleased, I reckon. He would, August agreed, his arm around Amelia's shoulders. Though I suspect he'd also have a few stern words for me about treating his sister right. Which you will, Martha said firmly, or you'll answer to me. Laughter filled the room, warm and genuine, wrapping around Amelia like an embrace. This was what family felt like. She realized not just blood relations, but people who chose to care for each other, to stand together through whatever life brought later. As August walked her back to her cabin through the gently falling snow, Amelia voiced the one concern that still lingered. "What if the curse is real?" she asked quietly. "What if by marrying me you're inviting misfortune into your life?" August stopped, turning to face her with an expression that was both tender and determined. "Amelia, listen to me. There is no curse. There never was. Bad things happen to good people every day all over the world. It's not because they're cursed, it's because life is unpredictable and sometimes cruel." "But what if no?" he interrupted gently. "No what ifs. Here's what I know: I love you. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. And if that means standing against the entire town or fighting off 100 imaginary curses, then that's what I'll do." He took her gloved hands in his green eyes earnest in the moonlight reflected off the snow. "Remember what I said the day we met. They called you cursed, and I promised to bless every step you take. I meant it then, and I mean it now. Every step, Amelia, every day for the rest of our lives." Tears stung Amelia's eyes again, but she blinked them away, unwilling to let them fall and freeze on her cheeks. "How did I find you?" she whispered. August smiled, pulling her close. "Maybe it was luck, maybe it was fate, or maybe, just maybe, it was your brother's final gift to both of us." They stood there in the falling snow, two figures joined in an embrace that promised forever, while all around them the world was made new under winter's gentle touch. The wedding took place on a crisp January day in 1874, with Reverend Miller officiating in the same church hall where August had defended Amelia's honor months before. The town's opinion had softened somewhat in the intervening time, partly due to August's standing as a successful rancher, partly due to Amelia's quiet dignity, and partly due to Martha's fierce championing of the couple in her weekly quilting circle. Amelia wore a gown of cream-colored silk that Martha had helped her make, with lace at the collar and cuffs that had once adorned Martha's own wedding dress. In her hair, she wore the pearl pin, something borrowed from a woman who had become like a mother to her. And sewn into a special pocket hidden in the folds of her skirt was a single gold nugget from James's legacy, something old, a reminder of where she had come from, and the brother whose friendship with August had set her on this path. August waited for her at the altar, looking handsome and somewhat nervous in a new black suit. When Amelia appeared at the back of the church on Silas's arm, August's face transformed with a joy so naked, so unabashed, that several of the ladies in attendance were seen to dab at their eyes with handkerchiefs. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Miller began once Amelia had reached August's side, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls who have found in each other not just love, but understanding, respect, and the courage to believe in new beginnings." The ceremony was simple but meaningful, with vows they had written themselves. August promised to honor, cherish, and believe in Amelia all the days of his life, to be her partner in joy and in sorrow, in plenty and in want. Amelia, her voice clear and steady despite the emotion that threatened to overwhelm her, promised to trust in their love, to face life's challenges by his side, and to never forget that it was his faith in her that had helped her rediscover her own strength. When Reverend Miller pronounced them husband and wife, August's kiss was both tender and triumphant, a public declaration of a love that had begun in quiet moments and private conversations. The celebration afterward was joyous, with music, dancing, and more food than the small community had seen in one place since the previous harvest festival. Even Edwin Porter and his wife offered stilted congratulations. though Amelia noted with private amusement that Edwin could hardly meet August's eye. As the afternoon turned to evening, the newlyweds slipped away, boarding the stagecoach that would take them to Sacramento for a brief honeymoon before returning to the ranch. They had plans, dreams they discussed late into the night over the past months. The horse breeding business was thriving, and with Amelia's brother's gold added to their savings, they intended to expand, perhaps even open a small shop in town where Amelia could sell handcrafted tack and riding accessories. But all that was for the future. For now, there was only the rhythm of the stagecoach, the warmth of August's hand holding hers, and the certainty that wherever life took them, they would face it together. 6 years later, Amelia stood on the porch of the main house, her home now, shared with August and their 2 children. 4-year-old James, named for his uncle, chased a puppy across the yard, his laughter carrying on the spring breeze. In her arms, little Sarah, just 6 months old, gurgled happily, reaching for her mother's hair with tiny, determined hands. "Easy there, little miss," August said, appearing in the doorway behind them. He gently disentangled Sarah's fingers from Amelia's dark blonde locks, now streaked with a few strands of silver. "Your mama's hair is not for pulling." Amelia smiled, leaning back against her husband's chest as he wrapped his arms around both her and their daughter. "She's strong-willed like her father, and clever like her mother," August countered, pressing a kiss to Amelia's temple. "A formidable combination." Together they watched as James finally caught the puppy, tumbling into the grass with a shriek of delight. Silas emerged from the barn, leading a beautiful Palomino mare, Sunny, now gentle as a lamb and the proud mother of several foals that had fetched top prices at market. "Hard to believe how much has changed," Amelia murmured, her thoughts drifting to the frightened, lonely woman she had been when August first found her on that dusty street in Yuba City. "And how much has stayed the same," August added, his voice warm with contentment. "My love for you has only grown stronger with each passing day." Amelia turned in his arms, shifting Sarah to a more comfortable position between them. "Do you ever regret it, taking a chance on the cursed Adler girl?" It was an old joke between them now, the fear that had once seemed so real transformed by time and love into something they could smile about. August shook his head, his green eyes as bright and clear as the day they'd met. "Never, not for a single moment." He kissed her, a brief touch filled with the familiarity of years together and the promise of many more to come. "Besides, I told you then what I still believe now. You were never cursed, Amelia, and I'll spend the rest of my life blessing every step you take." As if to punctuate his words, little Sarah reached up and patted her father's cheek, her tiny face solemn with concentration. Both parents laughed, the sound mingling with the other noises of the ranch horses nickering in the paddock, chickens clucking in the yard. James's continued giggles as he played with his puppy. This was their life now, full, rich, sometimes challenging but always worthwhile. And as Amelia gazed out over the land that had become her home, at the family that had grown from a chance meeting and a promise kept, she knew with absolute certainty that August had been right all along. There had never been a curse. Only fear and loneliness, and the courage it took to leave them behind for the promise of something better. Something like this, like love, like family, like the knowledge that whatever the future held, they would face it together, blessing each other's steps along the way.